Okay, guys, so we'll make a start. So good morning and thank you for joining us for this Sprint Zero webinar. So today, myself and Nick Farley, the MCC lead, are going to be taking you guys through Sprint Zero and also through how we're going to be looking at coordinating sprint planning, sprint execution, and some other details. And we've also got Alex on service management that will be joining at the end to do some slides through how we anticipate participants, and should I say how we expect participants to be engaging with Alex on service management. Now, we are going to be having this as a Slido for all questions, so I would ask that you don't raise hands within the webinar. Please go to slido.com and use the hashtag, and we've got some dedicated points in which we'll be pausing to run through any questions that have come through on the Slido. And with that, I'll hand over to Nick.
Hi, morning everyone. I'm Nicola Farley. I'll be heading up the Migration Control Centre, or MCC, I think, as it will be more universally known. So the MCC team is kind of the operational function that will look to coordinate industry migration at MHHS. So we'll be the key team that you'll be speaking to kind of discuss your kind of planning and your execution, and looking to kind of make sure that successful migration happens within the programme plan, and that kind of all the migration processes are working as expected. We've been doing kind of a lot of work over the last couple of months to make sure we're ready to support migration when it kicks off. But it's probably worth saying that we expect that to be a bit of a continuous improvement exercise as we kind of learn from Sprint Zero. I'm sure there'll be lots of stuff that we pick up around how we can do things a little bit better. So we will be looking to make sure we're taking the learnings from yourselves and from within the team to make sure that we're learning and kind of making sure that migration processes are working as most effectively, and to make sure we're managing migration in the most appropriate way. So I think back over to you, Joe, for the next couple of slides.
Yeah, perfect. So hopefully everyone is familiar with these sprint cycle dates. If not, they are available on the collaboration base underneath the Kestrel page in the quick links. But the key thing we kind of wanted to dwell on this slide is calling out when we've taken the EES data cut for Sprint Zero. So as you guys can see, on the 29th of August, we received the data cut that will be used for the submission templates going out on the 1st of October. With this, it's obviously worth just pointing out that when you guys get access to the production version of Kestrel, when you're looking through the supplier details tab, there is a scenario where you'll see a mismatch in regards to your portfolio against LDSO in Kestrel and what it is actual as per the day you've logged in. Just remember, this is as expected, and the date in which we're taking the EES data cut is the 29th of August. Now, looking into the choreography for Sprint Zero, sprint planning is going to kick off formally next Wednesday on the 24th. At this point is when the MCC will be producing the submission templates. We'll be completing review and validating them prior to publication on the 1st of October. And as you'll see, on the 1st of October, the envelopes will be issued, and this will be sent to all suppliers. Now, depending on when you're looking to begin your migration will dictate what we expect from you during this planning window, pointing out that all suppliers that are not planning to be actively migrating in Sprint Zero, we are requiring a weekly granularity forecast schedule to you. Very, very similar, basically identical to what you submitted in submission 2, but obviously giving you guys an opportunity to better reflect what your strategy may have been, whether or not that's changed, but also the updated EES volumes. For all those, however, that are going to be active in Sprint Zero and will be actively migrating, we are going to be expecting both daily and forecast granularity. Daily for the period from your target migration start date to the end of Sprint Zero, and then reverting back to weekly granularity from Sprint 1 onwards. We want all of these submissions in by the 8th of October. And then that will then give us a week to review these submissions before we baseline the schedule. And just a reminder that all submissions are to be submitted via Kestrel. Once we've baselined the schedule and that's been published, sprint execution will then start on the 22nd and then we'll run into 2026. Now, in the lead up to this, some key things to call out. As you guys should be aware, the environment you have been accessing previously for dress rehearsal 1, dress rehearsal 2, that has been in maintenance whilst we've been commissioning the production environment. We will be giving early access to that production environment to the suppliers that are supporting Sprint Zero throughout the ELS period, and this will give us an opportunity to do some smoke testing, but also collect the daily granularity submissions and do some verification against the ELS volumes. But then the full industry will receive access to the Kestrel production version on the 29th of September. Now, this is 2 days before the envelopes get issued, and it's really important for us that you do engage with Kestrel on the 29th when access is available, because that gives us 2 key days to work through any connectivity problems before envelopes get issued on the 1st of October.
Thanks, Joe. So we'll be looking to kind of use some kind of best practice we've seen in previous stages of the programme, and look to have kind of an active Teams channel to help managing migrations and kind of some of the planning activities. So this will be kind of split up with like a general Teams channel, so everyone who's kind of involved in that sprint will have access, and we'll kind of use that for general housekeeping staff. And then we'll also look to have a private channel with the suppliers and their account manager. And I think learning from kind of things like SIT, this allows us to have a kind of a bit of a quicker feedback loop and able to kind of communicate kind of rapidly as well. So we'll be looking to kind of provide access to the suppliers who will be executing over the next week or so. And you'll start seeing that as you kind of come on board with migration. Move to the next slide, Joe. So how will we be planning for Sprint Zero? So thank you very much for everyone who's kind of engaged with the previous planning submission rounds. Obviously, this is the first kind of sprint planning where we've kind of got a few people who are about to start migration, and we've still got a number of you that are in kind of the forecast stage. So we are going to have a bit of a split about how we kind of engage with you appropriately during kind of this period. For those who are looking to start migrating over the next couple of weeks, we'll be asking you to complete a sprint planning readiness assessment. So this asks some key questions around, are you ready to start sprint planning and sprint execution? And most importantly, it asks some questions around your agent coverage over the coming sprint, which will help support us providing agents with reporting by Kestrel around what their expected volumes they may see during the sprint window. And we'll also be starting to use the Teams channels with those who are looking to execute during this window. For those who aren't, we'll be sending out some we'll make sure that we're sending out key messages via the mail inbox like we've done for previous submissions, so kind of sending out reminders around deadlines and stuff, and also kind of sending a few chases if we haven't seen any responses from you. So please do look out for those communications from the migration inbox. And I think this gives us a nice place to pause for any questions, because I think this covered off the key stuff you wanted to talk about planning. So Max, I don't know if you've been able to keep an eye on the Slido. Is there any questions that come through?
Yes, we've had 2 come in. So the first question is, does this relate to LDSOs?
So LDSOs will receive the outcome of sprint planning, so the baseline submission would also result in updated reports to LDSOs via Kestrel.
Yeah, and I guess the extra piece to add to that as well is that with the channel set up for the sprints, there's going to be a general channel where LDSOs, central parties, are going to be included along with the supplier agent. So everyone that is supporting that active sprint will be in that general channel, whilst the suppliers will then have private channels with their MCC account manager. And then that general channel will be an opportunity for us to award a wider broadcast to all of those supporting migration. So hopefully that's answered that question.
Thank you both. There's one more saying, have you identified suppliers starting migration later in Sprint Zero who will need to be included in Sprint Zero comms?
Yes, everyone in Sprint Zero has an account manager assigned to them, and engagement is going to be concurrent throughout that planning phase.
Thank you. Those are the questions that we have in. No more at the moment, but I'll...
Okay, perfect. I guess just the last thing to call out on that sprint planning window, as we've called out, the account managers are going to be actively monitoring Kestrel submissions. So whether or not you've downloaded your submission templates, whether or not you've uploaded, whether they've failed or passed validation. So we are going to be on hand to support, and especially if you are having problems, please do raise your hand and reach out to the MCC, because we will be able to support suppliers in triaging issues if you are struggling to get plans to pass validation.
Sorry, Joe, we just had one more come in.
Yep.
And it was, should we have received Teams invites or only active suppliers in Sprint Zero?
Yeah, so only those that are going to be actively migrating or actively supporting active migration. So that will be your central services, the registration services, the agents supporting those agents. They are the only ones that will be included in the Sprint Zero channels. If you are then supporting later sprints, so for example, you're an agent supporting a supplier that's in a later wave and you're not supporting any Sprint Zero suppliers, you'll be included from that point onwards, but it's to ensure we've only got the right people in those channels.
Great. Thank you. I think that's all the questions so far.
Perfect. So execution, as we've said, there's going to be a lot of use within these channels, and the MCC are going to be making sure they're ring fencing availability to be engaging with those new entrants. So obviously at the minute we're speaking about Sprint Zero, but this will be the case for all sprints, that the MCC is going to ensure that they've got capacity specifically to focus on anyone that's starting in that sprint for the first time. With that, we're going to be using the channels for daily check-ins throughout the migration, and especially in a supplier's first couple of days when you're doing your first initiations, you'll likely see almost hour by hour check-ins just to make sure everything's going as expected, but also that if there is any challenges emerging, we're able to proactively support that. So there is going to be a sense of hypervigilance in these channels. And as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of interfacing and proximity the MCC is going to have with suppliers. Now, because of this, we've not going to be scheduling the supplier ramp up and industry ramp up stand-ups that are called out within the migration choreography document. Key justification is obviously, as we've said, there's going to be significant communication through these channels where we're going to have one-on-one opportunities to be engaging with suppliers. As such, we feel that in order to ensure that we can have as much diary flexibility to be reactive and support challenges, we're not going to be scheduling these meetings, because the level of engagement the MCC's coordinated and planned is going to make them relatively redundant. With that said, however, there are still going to be 3 core meetings that the migration team are going to be hosting, and that's the weekly migration sprint execution phase stand-up meetings, the mid-sprint review meetings, and the retrospective meetings. The key call out, though, is that the weekly migration sprint execution phase up stand-up, that will only be going into diaries once the weekly TORWIG meetings have come to a conclusion. Key reason here is that the content that will be shared at the weekly migration or at the TORWIG governance session will be exactly the same. So as to ensure that we're not putting participants through unnecessary meetings, again, there's going to be a lot of interfacing in the channels. The weekly migration execution stand-ups are only going to start once the TORWIG meetings have come to a conclusion. And then, yes, this just sort of pictorializes what we've just spoken through. So throughout execution, we're going to be monitoring and tracking suppliers' performance. And the key reason around this is that we need to make sure we're doing everything to assure that the quality of migration doesn't impact our ability to complete migration by M15, or also impact the wider ecosystem supporting migration. With that, we're going to be tracking some key metrics to create a very objective view of supplier performance, and that's going to be split both between planning and execution. So, for instance, in planning, we'll be looking at things such as your compliance with the sprint planning deadlines. How engaged are you with the MCC? Are we struggling to talk to you? In execution, are there significant deviations between what you've planned and what you've actually executed? How often are there deviations in your plan versus actual? But then again, also looking at how many of your migrations have failed, how many are incomplete. So you've had an MPAN go through, and we now have a MHHS appointment on the MS side, but it's failed on the DS side, and that's still outstanding and not been resolved. So these are the sort of things that we're going to be collecting and consolidating into that supplier performance scoring. But it is worth obviously calling out that we are going to be treating individual supplier scores as commercially sensitive information, and any poor performance, we're going to be interfacing directly with those suppliers to identify and manage any corrective action that's necessary. Now, on the topic of supply performance and deviation from plan versus actual, it's obviously worth noting that in Sprint Zero, we're only going to be executing planning once. And as such, there is the scenario that if, for instance, a phase of ELS gets extended for whatever reason, the supplier schedule that was submitted will no longer be in compliance with the upper limits required by each phase. Now, as I say, we're only going to be completing sprint planning once. So in the event a phase gets extended for whatever reason, and you're no longer able to increase your volume, because with that increased volume, it takes us outside of the aggregate max daily volume allowed within that phase, the MCC will be communicating and coordinating that throttle back with those suppliers. And the key message with this, though, is that in any instance where deviation from plan versus actual is necessary and directed by the MCC, this won't impact your supplier performance score. And yeah, I guess with that as well, obviously there's going to be lots of reporting that we're going to be doing through MWG, MCAG. You'll have already seen a lot around what we've done for the submission 2 findings. We're going to be doing similar reporting for each sprint as we go through the planning, articulating how compliant has the suppliers been in completing those deadlines. What is the net impact to M15 based on that baseline schedule? Then also we'll be looking through execution stats, as we kind of touched on, around plan versus actual. Are we on track to meet our sprint goal? Are there any exceptions that we need to be talking through? And of course, we'll also be providing a similar view to Ofgem directly around any risk to M15. A couple of other things that we're going to be looking to report on outside of just the migration itself and the performance of suppliers within migration. We're also going to be looking at canvassing and collecting migrated meter types that have successfully gone through the full migration process. We'll be then creating a centralized log on the collaboration base, where we're constantly updating and tracking every meter type that's successfully gone through that migration process. And what we'll also be looking to do is taking over long-term ownership of the migration exclusion list following the closure of the data cleanse working group, and we'll be monitoring reporting on the progress on the migration exclusion list, and also communicating out to participants when anything on that list becomes migratable. And over to you, Nick.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. As kind of Joe was touching on, one of the key things that the team will be looking at is kind of monitoring migrations and especially monitoring kind of volumes of migrations going through. And we've obviously agreed some key thresholds with kind of industry around what migrations are kind of sensible and viable to be supported on kind of a daily basis. And because of that, there is a possibility that there could be breaches to those volumes. If we kind of see that, we'll be looking to understand the impact of that. It probably falls into kind of one of 2 categories. So the first one, where a supplier has gone over their kind of their volumes, but it's at a level where, because of unused capacity, etc., it's not likely to impact LDSOs or central services because there is enough capacity not being utilised. And in that situation, we'd be looking to speak to that supplier directly, kind of understand what caused the breach, kind of work through any kind of corrective action measures, etc. But there is, I guess, and we hope this doesn't happen, but there is the possibility of the other scenario where there is a more substantial breach, which could start impacting kind of central systems. In that, we're obviously starting to be looking to engage and use the service management process to make sure that's being treated appropriately. And it's most likely in that scenario we would look to pause migrations to make sure we're not kind of adding to the problem. And then we'd be kind of communicating kind of more generally around what we would expecting parties to do. It's kind of worth saying that where there are breaches, it may be appropriate for us to report them through kind of programme governance or to kind of code bodies and kind of with code bodies of performance assurance teams as well, just to make sure kind of poor performance is being managed appropriately. Move me on, Joe. As I kind of touched on, we are aware it is possible that we may need to pause migrations. And again, we imagine this kind of falls into kind of two camps. One in which the supplier identifies themselves that they need to pause migrations for whatever reason. In this scenario, we would be asking that supplier to kind of be speaking to MCC as soon as possible that are aware this scenario might be happening, and then to provide kind of some key information. So why they think the pause is necessary, how long they think the pause might be needed for, what they think that could mean for their volumes, and then what they need to do to kind of be able to get back migrating, and then to keep MCC engaged during that process. We're aware of where that supplier's at. There could also be a scenario, again, we hope this doesn't happen, but we decide like centrally that we need to pause migrations across industry, or we need to pause it for a certain segment, etc. In this scenario, we'd be kind of looking to use the Teams channel to give a kind of a quick, fast update to say pause, and then kind of looking to then communicate that more generally and more broadly using other kind of communication methods. But again, we'd be looking to kind of share similar information. So why we think a pause is necessary, how long we think the pause, at this time we think the pause may be needed for, what needs to happen for us to be able to be in position to say migrations can start again, and then provide updates while we kind of get through that process to be able to get back to being able to start migrations. It's worth saying that obviously MCC will be working with kind of key kind of central teams to help support that if we did need to pause migration centrally, so kind of, you know, the service management teams, etc. And talking kind of that link into service management, we've got Mark from Alexon he's going to cover a few slides around how you interact with them and how you work with them. But I think it's probably always useful because we've got a few teams doing kind of things that may feel similar, just to kind of distinguish between what's MCC and when you'd be speaking to kind of wider Alexon. So with MCC, our role is around kind of supporting migration. So any issues regarding your migration plans, performance would be with MCC. So things like if you've got an issue with Kestrel, your migration plan is changing, or you've got something that's impacting your migration plan or your adherence to committed schedules, that would be raising us with MCC. Alexon Service Management, they're kind of responsible for central systems. So things to do, if you think there's an incident to do with like DIP, Helix, other Alexon systems, that would be kind of through the Alexon service management processes. And hopefully we've got Mark to cover a few slides.
Yep.
Perfect. Over to you.
But it is Alexon central systems, not other people's, so not DCC, etc. Okay. Next slide. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So this is just how the triage process would work. So it will go through the Alexon portal through to the first line triage. Sorry. We have a technical triage team, and it will look at things whether there could be business queries or genuine service management issues, and the flow there will shows you through that as to whether they are technical queries or technical questions or technical issues. Triage will happen within 15 minutes. The service operating hours are 8:30 till 5:30, although for for P1s, it's 24/7. However, you can log anything 24/7 through the portal. But if you log in something at 9 o'clock at night, it will get picked up the following morning. And next slide, please. And I suspect a lot of people on this call have seen these slides kind of many times before. So Alexon support service now is case management. It's for, I'm not going to read every word, but it is for the logging and tracking of cases with Alexon. It's around collaboration. It's allowing Alexon to collaborate with their service providers, the likes of CGI, Avanade, and Cognizant. It provides the self-service portal, which we'll come on to in a second, and it allows service users to raise cases and then track progress of cases. And it also includes the knowledge management element as well. So if people want to search for knowledge, just to be clear, it's not a tool to raise cases against other organisations such as LDSOs or even kind of the MCC. It's an Alexon tool, so it doesn't work in the same way that the fast switching service portal would work. Next slide, please. And the portal, like I say, a bit more detail on this. So it allows people to log new cases against Alexon incidents and requests. It allows you to track the updates, and you can see the status of previously logged cases as well. And it allows you to browse knowledge and knowledge articles. You don't need to be logged in to see the knowledge generally, but it does allow you to see that as part of the portal. Next slide, please. So we would encourage people to register for the portal ahead of time. You do need to register. The link is there. You will also need to set up a Microsoft Authenticator to access the portal as well, and the link is there to access the guide, to access the Authenticator guide, and the portal link is at the bottom there. We would encourage you to set this up ahead of time. For those people going through qualification, we have had separate sessions with people to make sure that things like parent-child and your ability just to log things against your organisation are set up, and we will continue to do that through the qualification process. As it progresses, I think we've pretty much done kind of qualifications through to 6. Qualification 6 is pathway 6 is post M11, but we have engaged with pathway 6 already. So if anybody's got any questions at all, I'm used to seeing hands up because when we do TORWIGs and MCAGs and stuff. So my apologies, I'm not used to Slido. So
yeah, but you've done a beautiful segue for us, Mark. I think that was the end of like the topics you wanted. This is just a reminder of the key ways you can communicate with MCC. But Max, are you able just to do a run through of any questions we've got on Slido?
Yes, we'll do. So we have one question that came at the start of this new section, but around do we have anything that links sprints to waves?
Not directly. You obviously need to be qualified before you can start migrating, and there will be some natural kind of sprints where we expect a lot of people within a wave will start migrating in that sprint because it's the next sprint that's available. But there's nothing directly saying if you're in this qualification wave, you need to be in this sprint. A lot of that will be dependent on a per supplier.
Yeah, I guess another piece with that as well is that, as Nick says, it's not a one-to-one mapping between wave and sprint access due to that qualification journey, but you should have all volunteered target migration start dates, and that can be, you can then derive which sprint you'll be starting on based on those cycle dates that were in this pack and also available on the collab base.
Thanks both. Another one is for suppliers in later migration wave, what should we submit this round? Should we indicate we plan to migrate 0 MPANs?
So the submission template will only start from the target migration date you've provided. So if, for instance, using an example from earlier, if you're starting late in sprint 0 and you start, say, on December 1st as opposed to the 22nd of October, when you download your submission template, it will show the first available day for you to provide migration values against, being that 1st December. So whatever you've provided us as that target migration start date, that will be the first date you're able to provide any values against.
Thank you.
So I guess adding to that, Joe, it's probably worth saying your migration start date would have been based on what you've submitted previously in submissions. If you now think your submission, you're likely to start earlier than that, it's probably worth dropping an email to MCC so we can update your submission template ahead of sprint planning starting, so it reflects the date that you obviously you think you're starting. If you think you're going to be starting earlier, if you're starting later, like Joe said, you could put 0s for those days and then put in volume when you think you'll be starting.
Thank you. So there was one around.
Can I just jump in on that one, Nick? So I think
yes, sorry, Alf, I said something wrong there. Very possible.
Yes, so that probably won't work quite if you're following de minimis rules or anything, because obviously you're constrained in the ramp up period and so on. So obviously you just have to, if you've not updated in time, you just have to follow what that current plan is and make sure you update it for the next sprint. But so obviously try to reflect as accurately as possible with the information you have what your current target migration start date is.
Thanks, Alf.
So there was one saying it was previously mentioned that MPAN level reports for migration will be available via the DIP, but this person has contacted the DIP who referred them back to Kestrel, and these reports aren't at MPAN level.
I think it's slightly off topic and a slightly different discussion is more focused on Kestrel and Kestrel readiness. But to be clear, Kestrel doesn't provide MPAN level, provides MPAN counts. So maybe there's a semantic misunderstanding there. So hopefully that clears that one up.
Thanks, Alf. So there's one here saying, can we get confirmation that no MPANs exist on exclusion lists for supplier MPIDs if we don't have any?
I think this is maybe something for us to pick up with the data cleanse working group. Obviously, that closure report hasn't been published just yet with that exclusion list, but we can. Oh, sorry, John, I see you jumping in.
Yeah, hi, I can answer that. Yeah, the exclusion list will set out the attributes of MPANs that need to be excluded by suppliers. You know, the responsibility for identifying the any specific MPANs within a supplier's portfolio, you know, will sit with the supplier. So it'll be their responsibility to have their own controls in place to make sure that they're excluding MPANs that are within the criteria that we set out within the closure report that we're producing for data cleansing.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. So there's another one here saying, how was the portal communicated to Pathway 6 participants? This person hasn't seen anything and they're in Pathway 6.
Is that relating to the Elexon Service Management Portal?
It doesn't say. But probably came in at that time.
Who did it come from?
Steve Blackler?
Sorry. Organisation would help, sorry.
Doesn't say on here.
Okay, so Pathway 6 isn't due till post M11. and we have started engaging with people. So I have a number of people I've engaged with, but without an organisation name, I'm sorry, I can't really kind of.
That's sorry, I'll just jump in, Mark. That's come from gas and electricity.
Okay, I've got those on my pathway 6. Sorry, pathway. So give me 1 second. I'm just opening up my spreadsheet. So what was the question again? Sorry, can you refresh?
How was the portal communicated to Pathway 6 participants? Steve hasn't seen anything.
There was a session set up. It was emailed to all the key contacts, and a session was held quite a while ago, probably 2-3 weeks ago. If people haven't had that, I'm more than happy for people to reach out to me directly on that. Just trying to get up the master sheet, that's all. Wait 1 second. But we go from the program. Master sheet. Sorry, give me 1 second. Just opening now.
Max, is there another question while Mark's has a look in the background that we can answer?
Yeah.
Not to put Mark on the spot there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
1 second, just to go back to submission, when you are starting at a later date, if we are migrating in wave 2, 3, and 4, do we need to resubmit a plan now for sprint 0?
Yeah, so as part of every sprint planning, we'd be asking you to update your forecast. So yes, you'll be expected to submit a new forecasted plan as part of sprint 0. But the period would cover from when you've said that you're going to start migrating.
I think in the migration framework, we're quite explicit on this one. So for every sprint, we require an updated plan to be submitted into Kestrel every time. And we do acknowledge that some things may not have changed. So, and it may just be resubmitting and reconfirming that, that nothing's changed. But that activity doesn't need to be happening, as you won't be compliant because we won't have a plan for you. Okay.
Thanks both. And the final one was just around will the slides be sent out after the call, which yes, the session is recorded, so it will be saved on the website.
Yeah, back to your previous question. I'll follow up with Steve on the on E.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
That's all the questions I've seen at the moment. So that's everything that's in Slido.
Thanks, Max. So Joe, unless you had anything else to add, I think this ends the content that we wanted to cover off in today's session. So in which case, I just thank everyone for their time and attention. It's much appreciated. And obviously, you kind of got Alex. I see that you put your hand up. Do you want to go for it?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I was just waiting for the content to finish before responding to Alf. Yes, Alf. I realise that it's MPAN count only, but maybe it's just a communication issue our end with our relevant account manager, who insisted that actual MPAN level would be available on Kestrel, which we know it's not. So maybe that's an issue their end. But does there need to be any other kind of comms from your end to DIP to make sure that they know that we should be able to access that MPAN level data, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think as you know, we from our perspective, and maybe this may be the misunderstanding. So we are seeing individual messages and we're aggregating them at the DIP level. So we actually have that data, and that is commercially sensitive, and we're only providing aggregate views of that. So that's very controlled. So maybe that's where the misunderstanding took place. And we do direct participants towards the DIP portal to interrogate and look for what's going on. And again, without going into too much detail, I'm not sure, and maybe we could take it offline, what sort of challenges you're looking to address. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's do that. Who knows, maybe it's a slight misunderstanding with a member of the DIP team that we
Yeah, no,
spoke to.
I'll
that
follow
didn't
up
quite
and
grasp.
I'll just make sure it's clear. So apologies for that.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Alf. Okay, cool. In that case, yeah, thank you very much for your time and attention. The slides, etc., will be published on the collaboration base in due course, or probably today, I think. But yeah, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.